Ayaan Hirsi, former Muslim who's received death threats for her defiance of Islam, whose new book, Nomad, a personal journey through the class of civilizations, calls on the West to be less tolerant of the faith. Ayaan, thanks very much for coming in. A lot of our viewers will watch this and say, actually, that's not representative of Islam. That's about deep cultural conservatism. That's what it is.
Well, there's the good news and there's the bad news. And the good news is societies like this one, like Saudi Arabia, are opening. The women we had just now are Saudis coming out and speaking out. I listened 2 weeks ago to women from Egypt, from Somalia, from Iran, from all over the place, all coming out. This is different from when I started speaking out in 2001, 2002, and I thought I was a lone voice. And the good news is we're all out there now, and we're exposing it, hanging out the dirty laundry. The bad news is, after the denial and the defense and the defensive attitude, we are going to face obstacles, and part of it is going to be violent.
But my point is that you're putting all this together as a condemnation of Islam itself. It's not Islam. It's particular varieties of how the religion's expressed in places like Saudi and Somalia and Yemen. It's not the Islam of Indonesia, which has, 4 times as many women as those countries put together.
Well, I wish it was not Islam. I wish Indonesia was different. I wish Turkey was different. I wish Malaysia was different. And the Islam practice there was different. And what you see is, in the 1950s,
You don't think the Islam of Malaysia or of Turkey is different to the Islam of Saudi Arabia?
In the 1950s, 60s, 70s, Muslims in Indonesia, in Egypt, in Pakistan had a completely different attitude toward modernity and especially toward women. You now compare it to life in these places and you see, in the name of Islam, the rights of women being taken away, and that is done through the establishment and spread of Sharia law or Islamic law. In some places it's less severe, in some places it's more severe, but at the core of it, the argument that those people who take our rights away, the argument they make is in the name of Islam. And to say to the people who try and separate religion from culture, a reminder, Islam was not founded in Italy or in the US or here in the UK. It was founded in an Arab and desert culture. And a great deal of that culture, that dynamic of shame and honor, has been elevated to what is religion, what has now become Islam.
What do you say to these incredibly powerful Muslim women who embrace their religion and their right to speak out, to lead countries? What do you say to the protesters in Tahrir Square who say, I can embrace Western democratic ideals and fight for them and still adhere to the tenets of Islam?
I say, let's go on and let's unite under an umbrella for freedom and change. 2 weeks ago, Tina Brown, a British national who's become an American citizen, put together this amazing conference. And she had an Egyptian woman who was protesting in Tahrir Square. And that woman and all the other young women she mobilized, 25 years old, she said, as soon as Mubarak was gone, the men told us to go home. And they were not included in the formation of, the constitution or the referendum.
But then that's about education, isn't it? I mean, a lot of your book actually talks about the difference. You and your father, sort of curiously ambivalent in his attitudes towards women, giving you an education. Isn't that what it comes down to? All religions
that young woman and all those young women on Tahrir Square were not talking to my father or my traumatic past. The men who excluded them for the freedom that they demonstrated for said that it was in the name of the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad, and in the name of Islam. What I found interesting about that young woman was that she said, I am a Muslim, but I do not want a society based on Sharia. And it's that separation that we need. Women and men in the Middle East who are serious about the aspiration for freedom is to say, fine, it's not a condemnation of the religion, but let's separate religion from politics. By doing so, we're going to save the face of Islam and
But you call Islam a fatally
rights.
Flawed faith, one that you say you hope you won't pass on. I mean, don't you have a worry internally that you're going to fuel a lot of religious bigotry from this kind of talk? It's the kind of talk that certainly wouldn't be tolerated from the far right.
Well, I look at the bigotry that is used by a father to force his 9-year-old into marriage and invoke the practice of the Prophet Muhammad. And in that, then I choose to say, well, there is the potential bigotry of white supremacists, potential, that has been dealt with, talked about, and really tamed. And then there's this huge bigotry that is used by men in the Middle East, inspired by Islam, spread in the name of Islam, to rob masses and masses of women of their rights on a daily basis. And my priority is then to say, let's separate that religion. I'm not for the abolition of Islam. I just want to separate Sharia law and Islam from politics and the right and human rights.
Why do you think we don't hear more about that then from the West? I mean, our politicians are very cautious to make the distinction between Islam and Islamism, the politicisation.
We hear it sometimes. I think that your Prime Minister, David Cameron, made a fantastic speech in Munich where he did say, look, we are not going to cover up for this anymore. It's not just violent extremism, it's also non-violent extremism spread in the name of Islam. Angela Merkel, Chancellor in Germany, did the same. Sarkozy is doing the same. So in Europe, there are more and more voices from the top leadership who are saying this whole business of multiculturalism is something that has to go. And I think that it becomes even more urgent as more and more Muslims flow into Europe. Just taking you back very briefly to the
film, are you confident that this could change in our lifetime? Because, you know, Saudi Arabia is a big ally of the West, right? It's presumably got to change from within. It's not our attitudes.
Well, things will change in Saudi Arabia as more and more women who are allowed to go to school challenge their situation and say this is not what we want. And right now the change you see, the video that we've seen, is very gentle in a way. But there are forces within Saudi Arabia led by men, human rights activists, and by women, and by homosexuals. And that change could come in a very violent way. So it's gentle, and I support it.
Okay.
But there is not. When we talk about Europe and the UK, it's a change in the reverse that we see, and that's the one that we have to be careful about.
Ayaan Hirsi, I'm so sorry to end it, but thank you very much indeed for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.